The cold that should have killed him. Winter had swallowed the town whole. It came without mercy, without hesitation, an unforgiving tide of white that drowned everything beneath it. Streets that once echoed with life were buried under thick blankets of snow. Rooftops sagged under the weight of ice. The sky, once vast and open, had become a suffocating ceiling of gray that pressed down on the world like a quiet threat. The storm did not howl. It whispered. Soft, endless, relentless. Snow fell in steady sheets, each flake gentle on its own but together overwhelming. It covered roads, swallowed fences, blurred the edges of buildings until the entire town looked like a fatting memory. Even the wind seemed tired. It moved through the empty streets like a ghost, brushing against doors and windows, testing their strength. Occasionally, it would rise in a quiet sigh, lifting loose snow into the air before letting it fall again, as if the world itself was breathing, slow, cold, and indifferent. Inside, people waited. They stayed behind locked doors and drawn curtains wrapped in layers of warmth. Fires crackled, heaters hummed, lights glowed softly against the storm's pale gloom. They had prepared. Stock supplies filled their homes with food, blankets, and fuel. They knew winter could be cruel. But they believed, as people always did, that cruelty would remain outside. That their walls would be enough. And for most of them, it was. But not everything had a place to hide. Far beyond the last streetlight, where the faint glow of civilization faded into darkness, something moved. Small, unsteady, barely alive. At first, it was nothing more than a disturbance in the snow. A faint, uneven line where the smooth surface had been broken. A trail that twisted and faltered, sometimes disappearing entirely beneath fresh snowfall, only to reappear a few feet later. Then it moved again. A small shape dragged itself forward, carving a shallow path through the drifts. A hatchling. It was far too small to survive a storm like this. Its body was no larger than a housecat's, delicate where it should have been strong, fragile where it should have been fierce. Its scales, once vibrant, once gleaming with life, were dulled by frost, their natural luster hidden beneath a thin layer of ice. The cold had seeped into everything. Clung to it. Owned it. Ice formed along the edges of its wings, stiffening the delicate membranes until they barely moved. Each attempt to lift them only made things worse, the brittle frost cracking painfully against its skin. It couldn't fly. It had tried. Once. And it had fallen. Now it crawled. Each movement was slow, labored, uncertain. Its limbs trembled under its own weight, muscles too weak to support it for long. Its claws small, curved, meant for gripping stone or branch, scraped uselessly against the packed snow. Its breaths came in short, uneven bursts. Visible. Fragile. Each exhale formed a faint cloud that lingered for only a moment before being swallowed by the storm. Each inhale burned. Cold air filled its lungs like shards of glass, sharp and unforgiving. It hurt to breathe. It hurt to move. It hurt to exist. But still it crawled. It had been alone too long. There were no memories of warmth. No clear images of where it had come from. Only fragments. A vast sky. A distant heat. A sound deep, powerful, comforting, that echoed in its mind like something half forgotten. Then, falling. Endless falling. Cold air rushing past. Darkness closing in. And then silence. When it had woken, the world had already been white. Empty. Cold. Wronged. It did not understand where it was. It did not understand why it was alone. But something inside it, something older than thought, older than fear, knew one thing. It should not be here. This was not a place for something like it. And if it stayed, it would die. Each step hurt. The hatchling lifted one trembling limb, pressed it forward into the snow, and pulled its body after it. The movement was clumsy. Weak. Its body slid more than it walked, its strength fatting with every inch it gained. It paused. Collapsed. Lay still for a moment, its small form half buried in the drifting snow. The cold crept closer. Wrapped around it. Invited it to rest. To stop. Just for a moment. Just long enough for the pain to fade. Its eyes fluttered. Closed. Something stirred inside it. A flicker. Faint. Fragile. But unyielding. No, not yet. Its eyes snapped open again. A soft, broken sound escaped its throat, half whimper, half growl. It moved. Again, because something deep within it refused to let go. A stubborn spark. A quiet defiance. A simple, unshakable instinct. Survive. Time lost meaning. The storm did not change. The sky did not shift. There was no sun, no stars, only endless gray and falling white. Minutes felt like hours. Hours felt like forever. The hatchling moved when it could, stopped when it couldn't. Sometimes it lay still for so long that the snow began to cover it, slowly burying its small body until only a faint outline remained. Then with a sudden, desperate movement, it would rise again. Push forward. Refuse. The world was silent. Too silent. No birds. No animals. Nothing but the soft whisper of falling snow and the faint, labored breaths of something that should not have been out there. Something that should not have survived this long. And then, light. It was faint, barely noticeable. A small, distant glow that flickered at the edge of the hatchling's vision. At first, it thought it was imagining it. A trick of a failing mind. A last illusion before the end. It blinked. Once, twice. The light remained. Warm, golden, different. The hatchling froze. Its head lifted slightly, eyes straining to focus through the storm. There, far ahead, beyond the drifting snow and shadowed shapes of buried structures. A single point of light. It did not move. It did not flicker like the storm. It stayed, steady, real. Something inside the hatchling reacted instantly. A pull, a need. It didn't understand what it was. But it felt right. It moved. Not because it had strength. Not because it had hope. But because it had nothing else. The hatchling dragged itself forward, its body trembling violently now, its movements slower than ever. The light didn't get closer. Not at first. It remained distant, almost unreachable. But the hatchling didn't stop. Step. Pause. Step. Its limbs shook harder now, barely able to support it. Its vision blurred, the edges darkening as exhaustion closed in. Step. It stumbled. Collapsed. Its body hit the snow with a soft, muffled sound. For a moment, it didn't move. The cold rushed in eagerly, wrapping around it like an old friend. Its eyes drifted closed. This time, it almost didn't open them again. A sound, faint, low, a hum. The hatchling's eyes flickered. There, again, a steady rhythmic noise barely audible over the storm. Not wind, not the whisper of snow. Something else, something alive. The light, it wasn't just light. It was warmth. The hatchling forced itself to move again. One last time. The structure came into view slowly, emerging from the storm like a shadow solidifying into reality. A building, simple, sturdy, half buried in snow, its edges softened by ice and frost. And there, at its base, an opening, a door, not fully closed. A thin line of golden light spilled out from the gap, stretching across the snow like a path. The hatchling stared at it. For a moment, it didn't move. It didn't understand doors, didn't understand buildings, but it understood what lay beyond that light. Warmth, life, maybe safety. It dragged itself forward. Closer, closer. The air changed. Just slightly. The biting edge of the cold softened near the opening, replaced by something gentler. Something that didn't hurt. The hatchling let out a faint sound, weak, hopeful. It reached the door. Stopped. Its small body trembling violently now, strength completely spent. This was the end. It knew it. One last push. One last movement. Or nothing. It lifted its head, pressed its small, frozen body against the metal, and pushed. The door resisted. For a moment, it didn't move. Then, a soft groan. The metal shifted, scraping faintly against the ground. The gap widened. Just enough. Just enough for something small to slip through. The hatchling didn't hesitate. It fell forward. Warmth. It hit instantly. Not gentle. Not gradual. A wave. A shock. Heat flooded over its frozen body, seeping into its scales, its limbs, its very bones. The sudden change was overwhelming, almost painful in its intensity. The hatchling gasped. A weak, broken chirp escaped its throat. Its body twitched, muscles reacting to the sudden shift, nerves coming back to life. It tried to move, to lift its head, to say, but it couldn't. Everything was too much, too fast, too overwhelming. The warmth, the light, the unfamiliar sense, metal oil, something strange but not threatening. Its body gave in. Completely. The hatchling collapsed onto the cold concrete floor, its small form curled instinctively, trembling as the last of its strength faded. Its breathing slowed. Shallow, unsteady, fatting. Inside, the space was quiet. Still, a garage. Tools lined the walls, carefully arranged. A workbench stood nearby, cluttered with parts and half-finished projects. Shelves held containers and equipment, everything organized in a way that spoke of routine, of familiarity. A heater hummed softly in the corner. Steady, warm. It pushed back against the cold that tried to creep in through the open gap, filling the room with a gentle, constant heat. A place of work. A place of solitude. A place that was never meant to shelter something like this. Footsteps. The sound was soft, measured. Approaching. The hatchling's body reacted instinctively. A weak twitch. A faint, desperate attempt to move. To escape. But it couldn't. It was too late. A shadow fell over it. Large. Still. Humans. The hatchling froze. Its body tensed as much as it could, instincts flaring weakly beneath the exhaustion. Danger. Its mind whispered the warning, even as its body failed to respond. This was wrong. This was not its kind. Not its world. Not its safety. It expected pain. Expected fear. Expected rejection, the same cold indifference the storm had shown. Its eyes fluttered, barely open. And it saw the humans, tall, silent, watching. For a moment, neither of them moved. The world held its breath. Then, the human knelt. Slowly, carefully, as if approaching something that might vanish if startled. Something fragile. Something dangerous. Something worth protecting. There was no sudden movement. No raised voice. No fear. Just quiet. Just patience. The hatchling waited. For harm. For rejection. For the inevitable end. Instead, the human spoke. Softly, gently, a voice that did not belong to the storm. You're safe now. The words meant nothing. The hatchling did not understand language. Did not know their meanings. But it understood something else. The tone, the warmth, the absence of threat. It was different. So different from everything it had known. For the first time since it had fallen from the sky, the hatchling did not try to fight. Did not try to run. Did not expect pain. Its body relaxed. Just slightly. Just enough. And as the darkness finally took it, it did not feel like falling. It felt like being caught. The warmth that brought him back. The hatchling woke to warmth. Not the fatting warmth of a dying body surrendering to the cold. Not the sharp, painful warmth that came from frostbitten limbs burning as they thawed. But something steady. Something constant. Something safe. It did not understand the difference at first. It only knew that the pain had changed. It was no longer everywhere. No longer consuming. The cold that had once wrapped around its bones seeped into its lungs, and stolen the strength from its limbs was gone. In its place there was something softer. Something that held instead of crushed. The hatchling did not open its eyes immediately. It stayed still, suspended between sleep and waking, instinctively bracing for the return of pain. For the cold, for the storm, for the endless biting silence. But none of it came. Instead, there was warmth. It pressed gently against its body, surrounding it completely. Not overwhelming, not suffocating, but present, consistent, real. Its breathing slowed. For the first time in what felt like forever, it did not hurt to breathe. The air was still cold by some distant measure, but compared to what it had endured, it felt almost kind. A faint scent lingered around it. Strange, unfamiliar, sharp in some places like metal or oil. Softer in others, something warm, something almost earthy. It was not the scent of snow. Not the empty, lifeless smell of winter. It was something else. Something that belonged to a place. A place that was inhabited. The hatchling stirred. Movement came slowly. Its body did not respond the way it should have. Limbs that once obeyed instinct now hesitated, stiff and uncertain, as though they had forgotten how to move. Its tail twitched weakly beneath the fabric wrapped around it. Fabric. The sensation was unfamiliar. Soft, light. It did not bite or cling like the cold. It rested, held. The hatchling shifted slightly, and pain flared along its side. Sharp, sudden, a reminder that not everything had been healed. A faint, broken sound escaped it. A whimper. Immediately. Movement. Close. Fast but not rushed. Aware. The hatchling's body tensed instinctively, a flicker of fear sparking through its exhaustion. Its eyes opened. At first, the world was nothing but blur. Light and shadow bleeding into one another, shapes indistinct and shifting. The brightness made it flinch, its pupils shrinking instinctively as it struggled to focus. Everything felt too sharp. Too close. Too real. It blinked. Once. Twice. Slowly the haze began to clear. Edges sharpened. Forms took shape. And then, the humans. He was sitting nearby. Not looming. Not approaching. Just there. Still. Watching. Waiting. There was no sudden movement, no raised voice, no display of dominance. He did not invade the hatchling's space. Did not crowd it. He simply remained where he was, as though understanding that closeness right now might be too much. His posture was relaxed but attentive. Aware. Every part of him seemed focused, not in tension but in quiet observation. As if he were waiting for something. For a sign. For permission. You're awake. His voice was soft. Careful. Spoken not with authority but with consideration, like one might speak to something fragile, something that could shatter under too much force. The hatchling did not understand the words. But it understood the tone. There was no threat in it. No sharpness. No demand. Only gentleness. The hatchling's gaze remained fixed on him. Unblinking. Uncertain. Its body tensed beneath the fabric, muscles tightening instinctively, preparing for something it could not name. Its mind whispered a warning. Different. Unknown. Danger. But the memory of what had come before, of the storm, of the endless cold, of the suffocating emptiness, lingered stronger. And this was not that. The human did not move closer. Did not reach out. Did not try to touch. He simply stayed. Giving space. Giving time. Letting the hatchling decide. The silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable. Not heavy. Just present. The hatchling shifted. Instinct told it to move away. To create distance. To protect itself. But the moment it tried, pain flared. Sharp. Immediate. It hissed softly, the sound weak but instinctive, its body recoiling slightly as the movement pulled at its injuries. The effort was too much. Its limbs trembled. Failed. It sank back down against the surface beneath it. Breathing uneven. Struggling. The human reacted instantly. Not with alarms. Not with forces, but with awareness. Izzy, you're hurt. His voice dropped even softer, as though trying to match the fragile state of the creature before him. He leaned forward, then stopped, mid-motion. His hand hovered in the air between them. Not touching, not grabbing, just there, waiting. The hatchling watched. Every instinct told it to retreat, to brace, to prepare for pain. But the movement was different. There was no suddenness, no aggressions. The hand did not lunge, did not close. It remained open, palm facing slightly upward. Visible, predictable, an offer. Time slowed. The space between them felt vast, though it was no more than a few inches. The hatchling's eyes flicked between the human's face and the outstretched hand. Searching, trying to understand something it had never encountered before. Joyce, slowly, cautiously, the hatchling did not pull away. The human seemed to recognize the shift immediately. Not in movement, but in stillness. In the absence of rejection. And that was enough. Carefully, so carefully, he closed the distance. His hand moved slowly, giving the hatchling time to react, time to stop him if it chose to. It did not. His fingers touched the edge of the hatchling's wing. Lightly, barely more than a brush. The hatchling flinched. A reflex. Its body tensed, a faint hiss escaping it again. But the touch did not tighten. Did not force. It remained gentle. Steady. Present. The human's expression shifted as he examined the injury. The membrane of the wing was torn. Not cleanly. Jagged. The edges were stiff, frozen, brittle from exposure. Ice still clung to parts of it, stubborn and dangerous. The damage was clear. Serious, but not beyond saving. The human exhaled quietly. A small breath, almost more to himself than anything else. Yeah, he murmured, we'll fix that. The hatchling did not understand the words. But something in the tone changed. Not worries, not fear, determination. The hours that followed were slow. Deliberate, careful. The human moved with purpose but never with haste. Every action was measured. Every movement considered. He gathered materials, soft cloth, clean water, tools that gleamed faintly under the light. Things the hatchling did not recognize. Things that could have been weapons. Could have been dangerous. But were not used that way. The first touch hurt. There was no avoiding it. As the human began to clean the wounds, the hatchling's body tensed violently, a sharp cry escaping it as the frozen edges were carefully thawed and treated. Pain flared. Hot, unfamiliar after the cold. The hatchling tried to pull away. Instinct, fear, but the human did not restrain it. Did not hold it down. He simply paused. Waited. You're okay, he said softly. The words were meaningless. But the tone, steady, calm, unchanging. The hatchling stilled. Not because the pain was gone, but because the voice did not change. Did not become sharp. Did not become threatening. It remained safe. Slowly the work continued. Cleaning, wrapping, warming. Each movement brought discomfort, but also relief. The cold was driven out piece by piece. The numbness replaced with sensation. Painful but alive. And every time the hatchling tensed, every time it flinched or hissed or tried to pull away, the human spoke. Soft, gentle, unwavering. You're okay. I've got you. You're safe. The words repeated, over and over, like a rhythm, like a promise. The hatchling did not understand them, but it began to recognize them, associate them, not with danger, not with pains, but with something else, something it had never known. Comfort. The storm continued outside. Unchanged, uncaring. The wind whispered against the walls, snow piling higher against the door. The world beyond remained cold, harsh, unforgiving. But inside the garage, something different was forming. Trust. It did not come all at once. It was not a sudden shift. It grew slowly, quietly, built in moments, in pauses, in the absence of harm. The first night the hatchling did not sleep fully. It drifted, woke often, startled at small sounds, at movements, at shadows. Its body remained tense, ready to react, even if it no longer had the strength to do so. But every time it stirred, the human was there. Not always close, not always watching directly, but present. The second night something changed. The hatchling woke and did not immediately panic. The warmth was still there. The pain was less. The human was still nearby. Nothing had changed. Nothing had become worse. It shifted. Slowly. Testing. The human moved but not toward it. Just enough to adjust something. To ensure the heat remained steady. The hatchling watched. And did not hiss. By the third night, it moved closer. The motion was small. Barely noticeable. A slight shift. A quiet adjustment. But it was deliberate. The human noticed. He did not react. Did not reach out. Did not acknowledge it directly. He simply allowed it. And that made it easier. By the fourth, the hatchling slept. Not from exhaustion. Not from the overwhelming weight of pain and cold. But from something else. It believed, in some quiet, instinctive way, that it would wake again. That nothing would hurt it. That the warmth would remain. That it was safe. The human watched it for a long time that night. Sitting quietly, the soft hum of the heater filling the space between breaths. The storm had begun to ease outside, the relentless whisper softening into something calmer. But inside, the change was far greater. He looked at the small creature resting beside him. At the rise and fall of its breathing. At the faint flicker of life that had once been so close to fatting. Ember, he said quietly. The name came naturally. Without thought. Without reason. Because even at its weakest, there had been something there. A spark. Small. Fragile. Barely alive. But stubborn. Unwilling to go out. Unbroken. The hatchling stirred slightly in its sleep, a faint sound escaping it. Not fear. Not pains. Just a presence. The human smiled faintly. Yes, he murmured, embers. And day by day, that spark began to grow. The fire that was found. The storm passed. Not suddenly. Not with a clear break between fury and calm. It faded. Slowly. Reluctantly. Like something unwilling to release its hold on the world. The snow stopped falling first. The endless whisper that had filled the air for days softened, then vanished entirely. What remained was silence, deep and heavy, pressing against the land like a held breath. The sky began to lighten. Gray thinned to pale white. Then to something softer. Something almost blue. The wind lingered a little longer, brushing across the frozen earth in low, tired currents, as if searching for something it had lost. But even that eventually faded. And when it did, the world was still. The town emerged slowly. Doors opened cautiously. Windows were unshuttered. People stepped outside one by one, wrapped in coats and scarves, their breath visible in the cold air as they looked upon what remained. Snowdrift swallowed streets. Cars were half buried. Paths had vanished. Everything familiar had been reshaped, softened into unfamiliar forms. But it was over. They had survived. And survival, after something like that, always carried a fragile kind of relief. But the world did not return to normal. Because something had changed. At first, no one noticed. It was subtle. Easy to dismiss. A flicker of movement at the edge of sight. A shadow that passed too quickly to be certain. A sound distant low, almost like thunder, but with no storm to follow it. People told themselves it was imagination. The aftermath of days spent trapped inside, listening to the storm's endless voice. But the signs continued. Growing, building, animals grew restless. Birds did not return. Dogs refused to leave doorways, whining softly, their ears pressed back, eyes fixed on the sky as though they could see something others could not. And sometimes, just sometimes, the light would dim, not because of clouds, but because something vast had passed overhead. High above the town, beyond the reach of human sight. Shadows moved, massive, ancient, alive. They did not fly aimlessly. They searched. Their movements were deliberate, their paths crossing and recrossing the sky in patterns too precise to be coincidence. They circled, waited, listened. Dragons, creatures older than the memory of the town, older than its buildings, older than the stories people told to explain away fear. They were not myths. Not here, not now. They had felt it. A disturbance, a break, a spark that had vanished when it should not have. The absence, something small, something new, something that belonged to the sky. Gone, and so they came. The first roar came at dawn. It did not begin as a sound. It began as a pressure. A vibration that moved through the air, through the ground, through bone. Windows trembled. Snow shifted on rooftops. The earth itself seemed to react. Then, it came, deep, thunderous, endless, a roar. It rolled across the land like a living thing, echoing through streets and alleys, bouncing off walls, shaking everything it touched. It was not anger. Not exactly. It was something older. Something that did not need to explain itself. A call, and it was answered. The sky darkened. People looked up and forgot how to breathe. Wings, massive, unimaginable. They stretched across the sky, blotting out the pale morning light, casting shadows that moved like storms across the frozen ground. One, then another, then more. Dragons. They circled above the town, their forms vast and terrible, their movements graceful despite their size. Their scales caught the light, reflecting it in flashes of silver, black, deep crimson, colors that shifted as they moved, as though they were made of something more than flesh. Their eyes burned, not with fires, but with awareness, with a purpose. The town panicked. Fear spread faster than the storm ever had. People ran. Doors slammed shut. Curtains were drawn. Voices rose in confusion, in terror, in desperate attempts to understand what could not be understood. Some hid. Some fled. Some fell to their knees and prayed. Because there was no defense against something like this. No preparations. No plans. Only fear. But at the edge of the towns, in a small garage half buried in snow, something else stood. A stillness. The human stood near the open space, his posture straight, his expression calm, but not unaware. He had heard the roar, felt the tremor, seen the shadows pass overhead. He knew. Beside him, pressed close against his leg, was something much smaller, but no less important. Zember. The hatchling trembled. Not from cold. The warmth of the garage still surrounded him, the heater humming steadily behind them. No, this was different. Recognition. Something deep within him stirred, responding to something older than memory. A call he did not understand, but felt. A presence he could not name, but knew. His body pressed closer to the human instinctively, seeking the safety he had come to trust. But his eyes were fixed on the door. Another shadow passed overhead. Closer this time. The light dimmed, the space darkening for a brief moment as something vast crossed the sky above. Then, silence, a heartbeat, two, and then, impact. The ground shook. Not violently, but with undeniable force. Something massive had landed. Close. Too close. The garage door rattled. The metal shuddered in its frame, vibrating with the echo of the landing. Ember flinched, a soft, frightened chirp escaping him as he pressed even closer to the human's leg. The human did not move. He did not run, did not reach for a weapon, did not try to hide. He simply stood between the doors and the hatchling. The handle shifted. Slowly, deliberately, the door began to lift. Cold air flooded in instantly, rushing into the warm space, carrying with it the scent of snow, of sky, of something vast and ancient. The light outside was brighter now, reflecting off the endless white of the snow-covered ground. And in that light, a shape formed. It filled the doorway, blocked the world beyond. A dragon, enormous. It stood just beyond the threshold, its body so large that it dwarfed the structure itself. Its scales gleamed like frozen steel, each one catching the light in sharp, cold reflections. Its wings were partially spread, vast membranes stretching outward, casting long shadows across the snow. Its eyes burned, not with simple fire, but with something deeper, something older, something that had seen centuries pass and remembered every moment of them. And those eyes locked onto the small figure behind the human. Zember. The hatchling shrank back instinctively, his body trembling harder now, a low, fearful chirp escaping him as he pressed himself against the human's leg. The dragon stepped forward. The ground seemed to react to its weight, the snow compressing beneath its claws, the air shifting as it moved. Each step was deliberate, measured, power held tightly under control. The human did not move. He did not step aside, did not retreat, did not challenge. He simply stood. Between them, the dragon's gaze shifted. Slowly, from the hatchling to the humans. The temperature in the room seemed to drop instantly, though the heater still hummed behind them. A low rumble built in the dragon's chest, deep and resonant, vibrating through the walls, through the floor, through the air itself. A warning. The human swallowed. A small, almost imperceptible motion. But he did not step back. He's hurt, he said quietly. No defiance. No anger. No fear. Just truth. He needed help. The words were simple, but they carried something more. Not a challenge. Not a demand. An explanation. The rumble deepened. For a moment, it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. Then, silence, heavy, endless. Neither moved. Neither looked away. And then, Ember moved. It was slow, careful, uncertain. He stepped away from the human's leg. One small step, then another. The human froze. Every instinct told him to stop him, to pull him back, to protect. But he didn't. Because this was not his choice to make. Ember moved forward, toward the dragons. The distance between them felt immeasurable, though it was only a few steps. Each movement was deliberate, his small body trembling, his wings tucked tightly against his sides. The dragon lowered its head. Slowly, carefully, the massive form bent, bringing its gaze level with the hatchling. They stared at each other. Ancient and young, power and fragility, wild and something else, something shared. Ember let out a soft chirp. Uncertain, questioning, the dragon's expression shifted. The tension in its body eased. The sharpness in its gaze softened. Not anger, not rage, relief. A deep, low sound escaped it, not the thunderous roar from before, but something quieter, something resonant, something that felt like an answer. A call, I answered. The dragon leaned forward. Gently, its massive head touched the hatchling. Carefully, as though afraid of breaking him. Ember froze for a moment, then leaned into the contact. Warmth, different from the human's warmth. Stronger, deeper, familiar in a way he did not fully understand. Home. The sound that followed was softer. A rumble, low, steady, and Ember responded. For a moment, everything else faded. But then, he looked back, over his shoulder, at the humans, the one who had found him, the one who had stayed, the one who had spoken gently into the silence and meant it. You're safe now. The dragon followed his gaze. Its massive head lifted slightly, its eyes shifting from the hatchling to the humans. For a long moment it simply watched, studied this creature, so small, so fragile, so utterly out of place before something like it. And yet, he had not run. He had stood. He had protected. He had chosen compassion over fear. The dragon understood that. Slowly, it lowered its head, not in threat, not in dominance, but in acknowledgement, respect. The human did not move, but something in his posture shifted. Not relaxed, not entirely, but understood. The dragon stepped back, giving space, giving choice. Ember hesitated. The warmth of the dragons, the call of something ancient, the pull of something he was meant to be. And then, he turned and walked back, step by step, until he pressed himself gently against the human's leg once more. The decision was made. The dragon exhaled, a long, slow breath. Not disappointment, not loss, understanding. Not all bonds were forged in blood. Some were forged in something else. Something quieter, something rarer. Kindness. The dragon straightened. Its wings spread vast and powerful, catching the light as they unfurled. It looked at the hatchling one last time. Then, it leapt. The ground trembled beneath the force of it, snow scattering as the massive form rose into the air. The wind followed, rushing through the open doorway, carrying with it the echo of wings and something vast disappearing into the sky. The shadows above shifted, moved, then slowly. They were gone. The sky cleared. The light returned. And the world breathed. Inside the garage, the silence settled once more. The human looked down. Ember looked up. Small, warm, alive, not lost, found. And this time, he was already home.